We got to talk about a lot of things.
A lot of stuff. And sorry if I derailed us a little bit.
No, I mean, when two ADHDers get together, I mean, this happens.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
Sabrosura pa' ti que qué.
Hola, hola. Welcome back to Café con Pam, the bilingual podcast that celebrates the power of our stories, the medicine in our voices, and the magic of reclaiming who we are. Esta semana, I'm sitting down with Becca Ramos, a Puerto Rican American creator, producer, writer, and award-winning supervising producer at iHeart Media. She's also the creator and host of a brand new podcast, Welcome to El Barrio. Now, if you haven't heard Welcome to El Barrio, aún, let me tell you, it's described as a love letter, an archive, and an invitation. It's a podcast about Puerto Rican identity, history, politics, spirituality, and pop culture. And it is unapologetically for us. And I say us, I'm not Puerto Rican, but I think all of us Latinos, because I love it when people embrace where they come from, because we get to learn from each other so much. For the kids who grew up ni de aquí, ni de allá, for everyone who felt their culture reduced to a stereotype or left out of the narrative entirely. Becca has spent years as a person behind the mic, producing some of the biggest podcast shows in the country, including Las Culturistas, and this is important, and she is now finally stepping in front of the mic. Welcome to El Barrio is out now on iHeart's My Cultura network, and whatever you stream your podcast, check it out. But what I think is important about this interview and what I want you to know about Becca before you press play on this conversation is that she grew up in Houston, Texas, born in LA, raised in the South, surrounded by very few other Puerto Ricans. And she spent years feeling othered by the very community she belonged to because she didn't speak Spanish fluently enough. And because she was visibly Afro Boricua in spaces that didn't know how to hold her. Because she was always the one keeping everything together while quietly trying to figure out where she fit. She is in every sense a diasporican who had to find her way home, and this podcast is her homecoming. In este episodio, you're going to learn what it actually cost to spend years being indispensable behind the scenes, and what it takes to finally decide your story deserves the spotlight too. We're also going to explore the complicated, painful, and ultimately liberating journey of a Puerto Rican woman whose relationship to the Spanish language was shaped by family wounds she is still in the process of healing. And we're going to dive into what it means to build something from the ground up when you've seen what award-winning looks like from the inside, how perfectionism and late diagnosed ADHD and dyslexia are part of the same story. So, if you've ever felt like you were too much and not enough at the same time, if you worked yourself into the ground, trying to prove your worth somewhere that was never going to see it, or if you've spent years wondering why the culture you came from never quite felt like it fully claimed you, este episodio es para ti. Y bueno, sin más, aquí está mi conversación con la creadora y host de Welcome to El Barrio, Becca Ramos. Becca, welcome to Café con Pam.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's so fun. I was so excited when I learned that you were going to come on the show because your story arc is fascinating. So I'm excited to explore it.
Thank you.
So the first
I'm excited
question,
to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. The first question we always ask is, what is your heritage?
I am Puerto Rican.
And you grew up in Houston.
100%. I did. I kind of feel like I am the definition of like a diasporican because I was born in Los Angeles, California. I was raised in Houston, Texas, and then I lived in Portland, Oregon for a few years, and now I live in New York City in the heart of New Yorkendom. So yeah, I am of the diaspora.
I love that. How was it for young Becca to live in Houston? Because one thing that we know about the geography of the United States, I don't know if there's like a little Puerto Rico in Houston, but maybe there is.
I feel like there is a growing Puerto Rican population in Houston. Like my mom has now found recently, Puerto Rican restaurants and places. And funny enough, a lot of the Spanish teachers, my mom is a Spanish teacher or was, she recently retired. A lot of the Spanish teachers towards like the end of her career were Puerto Rican. So she ended up building a Puerto Rican community, but it wasn't until like I was well into my adulthood that I knew my mom to have a Puerto Rican community, but I did not grow up with one. I didn't even have a lot of family in Texas. We were pretty isolated culturally and familially and geographically from everything that made us Boricua. And I think also something that is a big misconception for, I think, a lot of people is that the Caribbean Latino diaspora or just the Caribbean diaspora is very different from the rest of Latin America. And so I identified as Latina because that is what I was told growing up. My mom was like, we're Puerto Rican, we're Latina, whatever. But being around like a lot of Central Americans and Mexicans in Houston, because it is primarily like Honduran, Salvadorian, Mexican, Costa Rican, I found that they did not recognize me as one of them. They were like, you're too black to be Latino. You don't look like us and you don't speak Spanish. So therefore,
You're not
because
one
I
of
think
us.
I think if I were of a different part of the diaspora, like if I were Mexican or Salvadorian and I didn't speak Spanish, I think they would be more welcoming. They would just call me a no sabo kid. But I think because I didn't speak Spanish and I also am visibly Afro Boricua, and in general, there is a lot of, I think, misinformation on Caribbean in the diaspora of Latin America. It was just like a no zone of me belonging with the other Latino community.
How did you deal?
I mean, honestly, I have a lot of empathy now. I've done a lot of therapy. I'm now more well read. I have done more research. I obviously, in the birth of my own show, am learning so much about not just Puerto Rico, but the Latin diaspora at large. I have more empathy for the way people treated me when I was younger because we just weren't as evolved back then. This is like the 90s, early 2000s. We were not having the conversations about race and inclusion and all of that at that time. But to say that it didn't negatively impact me would be an absolute lie. I felt very othered up until like 10 years ago. Like actually 7 years ago.
Totally. And I mean, I think multiple realities, of course, we know this can exist. And one is younger version of you was hurt.
Yes.
Adult version of you has done the work.
Yes.
Doesn't erase the reality of what happened.
Exactly.
And so did you ever talk? Because I've heard you talk about how your parents bonded over how much they didn't like Houston. Yet
Yes.
you stayed, and so.
And yet they stayed. I think it was one of those things where, I mean, it could never happen now, I feel like. And I think it's also in society, we're having a very different conversation of what is the American dream and how it doesn't exist anymore because the middle class doesn't exist. So I think they were in a time, a very specific time in history where like they could achieve the American dream, right? They were two people from very impoverished backgrounds who, did not have college degrees, didn't get them till their 30s until they had well been married, established a family, and yet they were able to take themselves out of debt, buy a home, pay off that home, have a retirement. And that is just not something that I think I could do today. And I think for them at that time, it was just simply more affordable to live in Houston. And they stayed because they bought a house and they've paid off that house. So now it would be impossible to leave and go back to California. But I think they had always dreamed in the back of their heads that they would make it back to California at some point. And then through the literal myth of the American dream, of course it didn't happen. They could never afford to go back. And luckily they were able to create their own life in Houston and buy the house and whatever. But I think those of us in this like millennial Gen Z era, I don't think they would let that be the reason they don't move back somewhere, because the reality is we don't know what it's like to own a home. You know, we are not seeing our peers own homes the way our parents' peers owned homes, or we're able to like work the same job forever and like earn the pension, earn the retirement. So I think had they been together now, they maybe would have just slummed it out and figured out how to stay in California because it would have made them happier.
Yeah.
But I think at that time, it's what they knew. It's what they were told. It's what they were groomed to believe in what success looks like. And to be fair, their parents stayed in Houston. Like my mom, my grandparents, I mean, my dad's parents have passed since, but they passed in Houston. They were in Houston my entire upbringing, and my mom's mom is still in Houston. She lives with my parents. So they had their parents, which was a huge grounding factor for moving back, but they didn't have any extended family. Like all my dad's cousins and stuff, they all live in LA, outskirts of LA, you know, the Valley. And my mom's family is very all over the place. They're in New York, they're in Puerto Rico, they're in Florida, but they're not in Houston. Only their parents were in Houston.
It's fascinating, no, to think about the narratives that kind of like generationally shift and how
Yes.
we choose different lifestyles, and how like even with the jump of a generation, we can choose to like rewrite history. Like you moved, you went away
Yes.
for college, you now living in New York, you know, whereas like that, just looking a generation back was almost like, well, we just need to follow the path. And you were like, well, let me not. What do you
Yeah, it's
think
like we had
led
to
you
thug
to
it out.
get there? Yeah.
Honestly, I think in it's like such an interesting question, because when I think about my life, you know, I am young, you know, I'm 30, I'm turning 31 this month. Or I should say next month. It's March right now, but
I
it's
know.
Aries season. End of Aries season is my birthday. But I had always known, I think, growing up, I didn't want to be in Texas. I didn't have the words or the therapy speak to acknowledge what those reasons were, but something in me had always felt like this was not home.
Mm,
As much as I wanted to fit in and I did everything I could to try to fit in, I always knew in the back of my head, like, it was never going to work. You know, I'm pushing because that's what I've been taught. That's what my parents want for me. That's what society wants for me. But it never felt right. And I mean, to the point, even when I was applying for college, if you're from the South, you know, the career paths are doctor, lawyer, financier, teacher,
hmm
nurse, engineer. Those are kind of, if it's not STEM or business, they're like,
What are you
so
doing?
stay-at-home mom?
Right.
Yeah. And so when I was applying for school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I felt very like paralyzed in the idea of what does my future look like? Because I knew none of those paths were what I wanted for myself, but I had also never seen anybody do anything other than that path.
Mm.
So I still, even though I had dreamed to go to school out of state, maybe go to film school, like do all these grandiose art things, my parents were very like, please don't, you know?
It's not safe.
And I ended up, yes, I ended up succumbing and going to school in Texas. And I think for where I was at my life, it was the best decision I could have made. I don't think at 18, as much as I knew my future wasn't going to be in Texas, I was not ready to make that
Right.
big jump. And so I go to school in Texas, but by the time I graduated college, I think I just knew, I was like, I have to get out. Like, if there's one thing I do, is I have to get out of here, because there is no future for me in Texas. The writing was on the wall by that point. And so I ended up doing a diversity fellowship that took me to Oregon, Portland, Oregon, for advertising. And I was in advertising for a few years. And then I moved to New York for another job. And then because when I was in Portland, it was a great safe space for me. I think it was, you know, weirdly, even though it's one of the whitest cities in America,
I was gonna
now
say
it's
you
a very
you
different.
liked it.
I feel very complicated about my time in Portland, because I
Okay.
think now I could never do it. I don't think the Portland that I experienced in 2017 is not the Portland that exists today.
Yes.
And, you know, we were living in pussy hat feminism era, right?
Mm.
We're like barely post Obama. You know, Trump just got elected, but like his policies had not hit that wave yet. You know, we're like
yes.
gung ho, me too, time's up. So I'm living in Portland at that time, which like that's all of Portland, right? It's all white women being like, yes,
go.
I'm not afraid of black people. And then you like cross the street and then they're like,
Mm-hmm.
but coming from the South where people were like saying slurs to me, you know, were very objectively racist toward me. I enjoyed the passivity that was the West Coast. Cause I was like, I was so naive that I didn't register it in the same way. I was just like, everyone's nice. You know, I was like, no one's saying flat out slurs to me. This is lovely. And I weirdly ended up actually building a community of color that I never had in Texas. Like, even though, like, if you look at Texas's numbers, there's way more people of color in Texas than in Oregon. But I think where I worked, it was a place that hired primarily outside of Oregon. Like everybody was a transplant in general in Portland. And I think a lot of the people that I worked with were primarily transplants. And it was a place that capitalized on culture. So they pride themselves on hiring the coolest people of color across the world, you know? And so I ended up building this really incredible community of color, and we stuck together because the rest outside of this bubble that we worked, that was it.
Yeah.
We were it. And so it was the first time I had that and I experienced anything like that. So I think I have such a fondness and nostalgicness for Portland, but I acknowledge that like that was lightning in a bottle. Like that era, that experience, that time, it would never happen again. And if I were to move back to Portland now, and now, especially after living in New York, I'm too woke to go back to that. You know, for where I was in my journey of like relationship to my race, it was the pit stop I needed, but I could never do it again.
Is that where you got fired?
Yeah. Yes.
So you've talked about this, that getting fired from that Portland agency was a blessing. But I'm
Yes.
curious about that morning. You know,
Oh
like
my
not
goodness.
when it happened, but that day. Do you remember the day when it
Oh.
happened? How was your day?
Yeah, it's like
not after, but
burned
before.
into my memory. No, it's so funny because it's like now it's been so long and I feel comfortable enough to talk about it because I am no longer working in the advertising space. So I feel like I can talk more openly about the situation. But yeah, I remember that day so vividly because I was very naive, I think. I was a rising star at this agency. I had done Ad Color, which is like a program for young people of color in the advertising industry. It's basically like the best of the best young professionals of advertising. You have to be in your first 3 years of your career to participate and to apply. And I got in my first year. So I kind of had an inflated sense of self. Like, yeah, I was like, look at me, perfectionism 101, like got into the best ad agency as an intern, was the first intern to be hired in my class, got into Ad Color my first year, was traveling around the world with this ad agency for work I was doing in the agency. I was the leader of their Latinx diversity DEI group. I was doing the damn thing. And so I thought I was kind of untouchable because I had made myself so valuable at this workplace. But I was very naive to workplace politics and race, to be quite honest. And this is a place that championed diversity, right? That they like pride themselves on hiring the best of the best people of color to build culture for these brands. And these are big brands. These are Nike, KFC, Airbnb, you know, like really big brands at the time. And this is, I mean, an agency that still cements itself in, you know, the heart of the industry. I was told from the beginning of my time there, this is where people come to retire. Like they want to end their careers here. This is like the goal of people, is that they wish to get to this place, and I was starting my career there. So you also have an inflated ego of that. You're like, well, I'm so good. I started here. Like, what is next?
And even responsibility, no?
Yeah.
Like,
And it's a place that
you've
lets you
made
take
it.
on a lot of responsibility. Like, in lieu of payment, in lieu of like a salary that could give you a living wage, they just kind of let you do a lot of your passion projects. And of course, when you're a scrappy young person, you think
get
that's
it done.
great.
Yeah.
You know, you're like, oh my God, yeah, I get to do all these things. I had planned this gallery show. I had incorporated all these like artists in the Portland area to try to get them, you know, freelance jobs at the agency. I had done so much programming. I had brought BuzzFeed Pero Like to speak to the agency about, you know, using more Latinos and marketing more authentically and all this stuff. But I worked on a very difficult account, an account that was very white and very male and very bro. Obviously very male, very bro.
Pale, male, and stale.
Yes. And I think I have always been a very outspoken person. I've always, you know, not suffered any fools and pride myself on being very honest authentically. And, you know, maybe it's my neurodivergency. Who knows? You know, late in life diagnosed with ADHD. So who knows? But I think I put more trust into the corporate system than what is the reality for most people. And I think it's a hard lesson a lot of young people learn in corporate America, especially people of color. You know, you're in this place, especially in that era, championing like women's voices, people of color's voices. But the reality is when you rock the boat, you're the problem, not the system. And so they looked at me and they said, you're making too much noise. You're being too outspoken. You know, it was fun when it's like bringing BuzzFeed to the office and like sending you to Panama to do like videos about women of color traveling and, you know, hosting your little art show. But when you start making waves about people treating you inappropriately because of your gender or your race,
We don't want to touch that.
we don't want to touch that. So it's easier to blame the person who's making the noise than it is to look at the system that built it. Because the reality is it wasn't going to change. And I was naive enough to think that I could be the change I wanted to see in the world, especially at that time. But I've learned a lot from that experience. It was obviously a blessing in disguise because I think coming from Texas and just my Southern background and my own familial stuff, I was someone who was never going to quit. You know, I was going to ride that ship till it burned. I was loyal to a fault. Yeah. And that has been a hard lesson I've had to learn in my adulthood where it's like, it's okay to choose you. I was miserable. Like, I know that last year I was like passively looking at jobs and I had like people follow up with interviews. But when you're being told constantly, like, this is the best it's going to get by the industry, by everybody, by you're going to like events and people are like, oh my God, how's it like working there? Like, I dream to work there. You gaslight yourself like, well, this is the best it's going to get. How could I go anywhere else? And so when I got let go, to go back to my long-winded way to get to the day, I was so shocked. I had no idea it was coming. I should have, you know, looking back, I should have seen the writing on the wall because I got put on a PIP without my knowledge, which is illegal. I mean, to be frank, I probably could have.
So you were
filed,
unaware that
like,
you were on a
some
PIP?
sort of. Yeah, I was totally unaware I was on a PIP. No one told me I was on a PIP. There's no record of it. I mean, it was like a pretty hasty firing. It was basically my manager at the time went behind everybody's back directly to HR and let me go. And so I had people that I was connected with in the C-suite. I was very well connected in the building. So that's why I thought I was so untouchable. But the reality is if your direct manager does not like you or finds you to be difficult to work with, your career's over. Your career can be over like that. And I thought naively that because my mentor was like the global CFO of this agency and like I was really like well connected with the ECDs and like all these really important people in the building, I did not value the relationship with my manager as much because he did not show that he valued his relationship with me. And I thought because of where I stood with all these other people, that I'd be fine. But that was not the case. And we had a very difficult review where I had basically come with, I remember this so vividly. It was probably like 2 weeks before I got let go. 2 or 3 weeks. I came in with like 4 or 5 pages of evidence as to why I deserved to get a promotion and a raise. I had at that time been there for like 2 years. I had been making $40,000 a year.
Oh my
I was making
gosh.
so
In
little
Portland?
money. I was making so little money that I had a parking pass that was discounted by the city because I was under the poverty line.
Because you qualified. Wow.
Yes, because I qualified. Because I think under the poverty line was $60K. So
Oh
I
my
was making
gosh.
under the poverty line that I qualified for discounted parking. And I honestly also, as someone who just like didn't grow up with money, was always hustling my whole life, my whole college career. I always had a job in college. I didn't think anything of it. I was like, this is what you have to do. Especially, I think if you're a millennial, you were very
Yes.
much taught like, you got to eat it. You got to earn it. You know, you got to work for it.
Yes.
So I
Be grateful for it.
Exactly. So I was like, okay, but it got to a point where I was like, I'm doing so much work for this office and I'm not seeing that reflected. And at this time as well, somebody who was at my same like level, but title level, but they had just gotten hired. They were fresh out of college. So I had been there for 2 years. They had just graduated, was making $20K more than me. So I had
Wow.
asked for a market level raise. I was like,
Yeah.
I'm not asking for like a huge promotion. If anything, I'm just asking for a market level raise. I'm not even asking for the promotion. More importantly, I'm asking for the market level raise. I come with 4 pages of evidence, of printed evidence as to why I deserve this, all the amazing things I had done for the office. And he looked me in my face and said, wow, I've never had anybody come with me with so much proof as to why they deserve a promotion. And I looked at him because at this point, I was kind of like in a dark place. You know, I was mentally unwell. I had also just like recently gone through like a very tumultuous breakup. Like I was going through a lot of change in my life. Like I was dating this person for 3 years. It was very abusive. It was a lot of stuff. So I was like feeling very alone, very vulnerable. You know, I felt very underappreciated and overworked. So this was like my big swing. And at this time, I had also moved a few departments because of issues I had with other managers that were felt, you know, looking back, very racially biased. And so I'm presenting this to him, and he says that to me, and I say, well, have you ever managed a woman of color? And he was like, no. And I was like, yeah, because you've only ever promoted white men. I like said something along those lines. Obviously, they rubbed him the wrong way. And the next day, he hands me a letter that basically said I actually was really bad at my job and that I needed to like improve a bunch of stuff. So I was like, oh, so like a few days ago, you told me you've never seen somebody show so much proof as to why they deserve a raise or promotion. And then you go back a few days later and you're like, actually, you're doing everything wrong. You're really bad at your job and you have a lot of work to do. And I'm like, so at this point, I'm feeling like very on shaky ground. I'm like, I don't know what to do. It never occurred to me that I get let go, but I was kind of like, I don't know where I go from here. And I think I felt very lonely because nobody in my life, like my personal life, had been through this. I was the first person to move out of state. I was the first person in my family to go from college to career. You know, my parents did not have any guiding words for me. My brother was going through his own journey. He didn't have any guiding words for me. I felt very alone and like the weight of like the world on my shoulders. And I think I was very depressed. And so I think that reflected in my work. I definitely wasn't doing the best job, but I also felt very scared. Like there was a lot of moments with this team that I was working on that was like, it was a lot of bullying. It was a lot of like tension. It was a lot of like walking on eggshells, like any mistake at that point then. At any mistake I made, I felt like it was like a strike against me. And so I didn't feel like I could do my job because I didn't feel like there was room for me to make any mistakes. And it got to this point, I'm on vacation with my family that they've known about for months. I took this time off months ago. We're at Disney and they were looking for a reason to fire me. I am at Disney. with my family, I get these crazy urgent calls and texts. And mind you, I'm a junior strategist. I am the bottom of the totem pole. Whatever mistake I made is a direct reflection of whoever is above me. I know this now, but at that time, of course I didn't. And I'm getting all these calls and texts because there was like a mistake that happened, that like some thing didn't get archived on the YouTube. That was a licensing issue that could have burned, the relationship we had with this account and cost us thousands of dollars. This was not my mistake.
Right.
I learned like that I did not do this. It was not my fault at all, but they needed somebody to blame. And more importantly, they needed a reason to fire me. So I'm getting blown up. I'm on vacation. I knew in that moment I was going to get fired. Like something in my gut, I'm like, I'm unwell.
This is it.
I lose like a whole day on vacation with my family to cry in the hotel room. And I'm like journaling. I remember I even have that journal somewhere over here. It's like gonna make me teary-eyed thinking about it. But I remember I was in such a bad place. I was like writing affirmations like, you are worthy, you are good, you are okay. Like, because they had made me feel so low about myself, my job, anything. And my dad looked at me, I remember at the end of the day, he was like, well, the worst they can do is fire you. The next week, I get a meeting on my calendar for Friday at 4 p.m. Or no, Monday at 4 p.m. So it's like my first day back from vacation. And I go to this meeting and I see it's my boss and HR. And I'm like, oh, I'm getting fired. Like immediately. I was like, oh, this is what this is.
Yeah.
And they wanted to talk to me. And I definitely was not emotionally mature at the time. Of course, I'm 23.
Yeah.
I remember just shutting them down. I was like, I actually don't want to speak to you. Let me get my stuff and leave. I was like, they were like, no, but let's explain. I was like, I can't express to you more that I do not want to talk to you right now. What do I need? And can I go? And they were like, yeah, here's your folder. And I was like, all right, thank you. And I like left, called my parents, had a panic attack, like truly hyperventilating, crying, just like the end of the world. My girlfriends came over and like got pizza and like held me. But like to the point that like my mentor had dinner with me later that week. I couldn't get out of bed. I was like truly grieving because like this job was my whole life. It was at that time.
And it was painted to you as such.
Place to work at. And it was painted to me like it was a place that built you to build your life around it. I was sleeping in this office. I was spending 80 hours a week working, not getting paid overtime to work on pitches. And like I was being asked to do so much more than was outside of my job description. I was asked to be the weight of the Latino voice in the whole agency. I also was working as a dog walker to pay my bills, to be quite honest, like as a side job on top of working 80 hours a week at this office. I was dog sitting for people so that I could have a little extra cash to do things. So I was like, my whole world's over. I don't know what to do. So I was like pretty like stuck in bed for like a week or two. And then I was like, okay, we got to wrap up the pity party. And so I just started viciously like applying, interviewing, talking to like my network, trying to figure out what are my next steps. And I very gratefully had a recruiter who worked at Wyden. Because like I said, no one knew I was getting fired. Like he clearly went behind his back. Like no one knew I had a PIP. No one knew anything was going on. My mentor, the global CFO, took me out to dinner and was like, I had no idea that happened until you left that building. And I immediately called everybody and said, what the fuck? To the point that they try to hire me back. And I was like, no, like well, I'm an Aries.
The damage is done.
Burn. Like the bridge burnt. So I was like, fuck you. I'm not doing this. I'm not coming back. And I then had my recruiter friend who still worked at the agency. She was like, I have these friends in New York. I think you got to go to New York. I think that is I don't think there's anything left for you here. You have to go. And I was like, fuck it. Okay. I book a trip to New York for a week in December and just set up a bunch of meetings. I was like, hopefully I'll figure it out while I'm there. I crash on a friend's couch. I go do all these meetings. I get hired on the spot for a job. And then 3 weeks later, I'm in New York City and I've been here ever since. And so it was a blessing in disguise. And I'm very lucky to have only been unemployed for like 2.5 months. And, it all worked out. But at that time, it felt like my world was over. And it was hard to reflect on how painful all of that was. Like all the racial and gender roles that played into it, my age that played into it, stuff that still haunts me to today, of
Yeah.
I had super PTSD with all my managers. I remember being in reviews crying because every time I had a meeting, I thought I was going to get fired. And it's like now, like what, 7 years later, am I finally like able to have a meeting with a manager or not be like, I'm going to get fired tomorrow. But that doesn't mean I haven't experienced other things. But yeah, it's great. I have not told that full story anywhere. So you're the first to hear it on air, but I think I'm past it enough to be able to share.
Thank you for sharing. And I think it's important because I think something that we don't, it's that invisible weight, especially as we know data shows Latinas are heavily underpaid.
Yes.
And we often see like, oh, Becca is like doing so great. It's at this awesome agency. And we don't see that background of you having to work an extra side job, of you having to do all these things, having to deal with all the internal dynamics. And it reminds me of a client of mine who she worked at a place for 10 years and she recently moved to a different place. And we were talking about, I mean, PTSD is real in the workplace because she was like, you know what happened? Yeah. She was like, you know what happened? I told my manager, and she's like director, VP level, like, and she's like, I told the CEO of the company that I had a grooming appointment for my dog. And she texts me back like, I don't need to know, like, it's fine. You don't need to tell me. Like, I know you're doing the work. Like, thank you for letting me know. I hope the grooming appointment's great. And she was like, so like, why would she say that? And I'm like, because you drank the Kool-Aid before that you needed to just be managed by the second, even though you were not supposed to, like, you're not supposed to. You get paid to get the job done. And this person, this new boss of yours, is just giving you evidence of what it's like to be paid to get the job done. She doesn't care whether you work at 9 p.m. or at 3 in the morning. She just knows that she cares that you're getting it done. And that was just like, I could see her brain explode.
It's so traumatizing to unlearn that.
Yeah. It's big. And so thank you for sharing, because I think it's something that it took me a long time to unlearn it as well. And it's something that we need to talk about more because just like you shared, you were alone. Like, who would you have gone to tell you this? To be like, no,
I was so alone on so many fronts because it was like I had no peers, or at least like from my like family, from my upbringing. And I think this is also like in the racial privilege conversation where it's like I am the first in my family to be reaching career heights. Both my parents have like trade jobs, so to speak. My mom's a teacher and she didn't get her degree until her 30s. My dad was a progressive insurance adjuster, but he stayed at that job for 30 plus years. He worked that job my entire life. He also went to school and graduated in his 30s. So they did not have any advice of like how to navigate these types of workplace dynamics. They were put your head down and just go with it type of people, because that's what they were taught,
for the opportunity.
and that was their survival. Yeah, and then it was also with my peers. It's even though there was a great community of color, I was in a very unique position, I think, at that place. And I think also being a woman was a huge difference between a lot of my peers of color. I think it is a very bro-y place. I think even if you were a man of color, you still had the privilege of being a man and being a bro. Whereas like the women of color definitely were not having that same journey. And I was one of the few like younger women of color. And I think that was like a hard dynamic for like my older mentors at the office that were kind of like, play the game. And I was like, how do I do that? Because it hurts. And so I was caught between this like my own moral dilemma and like going with the flow. And, ultimately it showed my ass, but it was a lesson I needed to learn. And I now know how to protect myself a little bit more and be more mindful and guarded and not be so trusting of the corporate process. But also, I've learned that was also not okay. Like, it's not like because I am more guarded and I'm more protective and I know how to navigate these spaces better doesn't mean I would still tolerate behavior, because like that was objectively wrong. Like the way
Right.
that situation went down was wrong. When I've told people in my past about this, they're like, you probably could have sued, for wrongful termination. But it's behind me. I took severance and therefore I was no longer, according to that contract, allowed to, take
do
any legal
anything.
action. But I also had to, right? Like I was
Correct.
someone making $40,000 a year. I could not afford to not take any severance. Like, because I didn't know when my next paycheck would come. I didn't know what my next job would be. So, and in Portland, when you've worked at this place, it's kind of like a scarlet letter on your back because you are too good to work anywhere else. Everybody in Portland is trying to work there. So once you've worked there, they're like, well, we can't pay you like more because we can't afford you because you worked there. And we know they don't pay you well, but you get to at least say you worked there. So,
Right.
it's, yeah, I'm very glad I'm no longer in advertising.
For sure. For sure. So after that happened, you've spent a lot of time being in the background. So you were producer Becca, no?
Yes.
And I'm curious because when I was prepping for this, I'm like, oh, is like when I said earlier, your story arc is really interesting of being a Puerto Rican in Houston who didn't feel like Houston was home to being behind the scenes in all of these places until now. You're like, now I'm finding my home and creating my own home. And when was the moment, and I'm kind of like speeding us up a little bit, but when was the moment when you felt it's time to stop being behind the scenes and now I need to put myself in the forefront?
It's funny because I think I had always had this as the goal, I think. Not that I wanted to be the face by any means, but I have always been driven by the podcasting medium. When I applied to work at iHeart, I had actually applied through their diversity fellowship Next Up, which is to get more diverse voices in podcasting. And the program is actually geared not to make you a producer, but to make you talent, to make you a host, to make you a show creator. And I had applied with the idea of this show and like another show because you had like an option to apply, I think, with 1 to 3 ideas. And I applied with the idea of Welcome to a Barrio, but it wasn't Welcome to a Barrio then. It was just like Puerto Rican history podcast ? And then I had like another show about like, I think, women of color and sex and dating and how like taboo, it kind of is in our communities to talk about this stuff. And now I'm like so glad I didn't make that show because I feel like we have a billion shows like that.
Yes.
But I had applied to iHeart to do this, and my boss actually was like, you're too good for my program. You're too qualified. You have too much experience. Can you actually just work for me? So then that's when I put the idea on the back burner and I just decided I was going to learn as much as I could. And that was really important for me because I wanted to do it right. I think as women of color, as people of color, you only get one shot. You really do. Like that's the reality of the world, is that there are not a lot of second chances for us. So if I'm going to do this podcast, I was like, I have to feel 100% confident that it will showcase some sort of success. And so I grinded in the background because I really wanted to understand how the network worked, how making a show worked, how, booking worked, how all of these parts of the process operate, and feel confident in who I am as a producer to then be able to be front facing.
Okay. So now looking at your producer skills, what have you had to let go of as a host?
That's a great question. I don't know if I've let go of too much because I do produce on my show. I am like the executive producer and the host
And the
and
host.
creator of the show. But I'm very grateful to have a producer on my team with me who manages a lot of the day to day. But I guess to say what I would maybe have let go is maybe being as precious about every step of the process, because sometimes it's about it getting done, not about it being perfect.
Yes.
And I think for a lot of stuff, especially in the development of the show, like getting to the launch, I think I waited to the last minute on a lot of stuff because I was so like, is it right? Is it perfect? Have we developed this perfectly? Is it going to be the best it's going to be? And it's like, you got to put it out there at some point. You just got to, and like let the feedback come in and adapt as you go on, learn from the experience. But I think with the fear of perfectionism in the back of your head, you're like, but if it's not perfect, it's going to be wrong. And that's just not true.
And does that pressure come from having produced award-winning shows and or also your ADHD? I have ADHD. And so I want to touch a little bit on that because the average woman is diagnosed at 36.
Yeah, crazy.
I wonder if that perfectionist voice comes from the pressure of like, I've already done things really well. Am
Yeah.
I going to be able to do it this way? And then also the neurodiversity coming in to be like, but are you going to make it good enough?
Yes, I think it's all of the above. I think when you've worked on award-winning work and you've seen the resources that are allocated to those things, and then you are starting something from scratch, it is very daunting because you're like, well, I know what is possible and I know what I'm getting. And that sucks. So you have to like be the best you can be so that they trust you to give you that level. And so I think it was a lot of pressure on myself because I have created such award-winning work, but also I am a perfectionist. And I do think that stems from a coping mechanism of my ADHD because I had all of these learning disabilities growing up that were sideswept because people just don't look at women, especially women of color, in those ways. And it's crazy to reflect when I got the diagnosis. I felt so much relief because I like looked back at all these moments from my childhood and my school and college, and I'm like, yeah,
Makes
I wish
sense.
literally anybody said something to me instead of me having crippling anxiety. Like I thought I had IBS, and it's just like deep anxiety that is like a coping mechanism of my ADHD. That's just like a whirlpool of issues. So yeah, I think it's all of the above.
And how do you cope with it? Or what have you done to deal?
I have a great therapist. I have an incredible therapist. Love her to death. And I am on Wellbutrin and Prozac. Well, I gotta get my Prozac again. As someone with ADHD, it's really hard to take your medication every day. But so I've run out of my prescription. I haven't gotten and getting it, but I haven't dabbled in ADHD medication yet. My therapist and I are kind of trying to see if tackling the deep anxiety first will help with managing the ADHD. Because I just think from my own reactions with caffeine, as someone who loves coffee, but I can only have so much coffee, I can't imagine what being on a stimulant will affect my anxiety. So, because taking Wellbutrin, I've had to significantly cut my coffee intake, or I will have a panic attack.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm currently working through it in therapy, working through a medication regimen. I have a really amazing partner who is like incredibly understanding and super helpful, but also that's posed challenges in my relationship too. I think we've struggled with a lot of things that until I got diagnosed, it was like, oh, well,
That's
this
why.
colors a lot of stuff. I think he was just like, do you hate me? Like, do you not think about me? Like the way I think about you. And I don't think that's the case. I think my brain is, needs support. So.
For sure. I had to get off Wellbutrin because I got paranoid.
Okay, I felt that way when I first started taking it, but I think I am on a pretty low dose. I think I'm only on the 150 milligrams. And then we were trying the Prozac to kind of counteract maybe a little bit of that anxiety. But to be honest, I have not taken it regularly enough to know
Have
if
data.
it's helping. Yeah. But I was on Lexapro for like 2 years, and that was before my ADHD diagnosis. I had this deep anxiety, and then I hit a point, I think in 2022 or 2023, that I was like deeply depressed. I had never experienced that level of depression. I got really spooked. I was like in bed and I was sobbing and I like couldn't get out of bed. And there was like no reason for that. Like I had an amazing boyfriend, I had an amazing life. I was just like, this is
Your
scaring
world
me.
was
I don't know
great. Yeah.
why. And so I went to my GP and she just prescribed me Lexapro. And, it's not her fault. She's not like a psychiatrist. And, I think it worked for a little bit. I think it really helped numb the voice that was anxiety driving for making decisions. But then I was on it, I think, for too long. And then it became like a paralyzing factor where it was like, it was numbing that voice. And then all of a sudden it was just numb. And
Oof.
I was very apathetic, I think, to my life. Like I wasn't crying in that same way. And I didn't recognize I was numb because I was still very emotional. Like I still cried a lot. I feel like I still had emotions, but I think in my like true day to day, I just was like, I can't make any decisions. And because of the numbness, I didn't feel the anxiety of not making decisions, but I also was paralyzed. Like I just wasn't doing anything. I was just like doom scrolling all day. I wasn't working out. I wasn't really hanging out with my friends. I just was just like numb to life. And I'm very grateful I got off of it because I didn't realize how numb I had felt until I detoxed from the Lexapro.
What was the deciding factor to be like, I need to get off this thing?
My partner, we had like a real like come to Jesus meeting and was like, you have to figure this out or like, I don't know if this relationship's going to survive. And, we've been together like almost 5 years. It'll be 5 years in July or June. At this point, this was like October or September, maybe August of last year, August 2025, that he was like,
What to do?
I can't live like this, but also you can't live like this. Like, I don't know how to help you and I don't know what's wrong. And this was before my diagnosis too. So he was like, I don't know what's wrong. I don't know how to help you, but also I can't live in this relationship like this, which is very understandable.
Yeah. It's a powerful
say that as,
conversation.
like, I needed that conversation. And so I got a new therapist. I got a psychiatrist. I, got diagnosed. And I do think it like night and day changed our dynamic, our home, all these things because he was carrying the weight of our relationship. I think he's a provider by nature. He's very much a caretaker. He was, groomed to be the caretaker of his family. So he just passively did that in our relationship. But I think it got to a point where he had built up resentment, understandably, because I wasn't pulling my weight in the relationship. And he had hit his wall. He had hit his breaking point. He's like, my life's hard too. Like I'm going through stuff too. And I don't feel like I can lean on you. And
Ooh.
that hurt. I was like, because I'm like, you're the best thing that ever happened to me. I fully believe we are together forever. So like, I can't lose you. So I have to do something. Because like I need you to know how important you are to me. So like, I got to get up and I got to figure it out.
And she did.
And I did.
Yay. It's mental health, I think. I've been talking about mental health for the 10 years that Cafe Con Pam has been alive. And in the beginning, I remember my friends be like, you're so privileged that you get to talk about it.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that we are more open now to have these conversations because we have to. Like,
Yeah.
how many relationships have been broken? How many lives, even I would say, have been just lost because the conversation's not happening. So I'm glad you got help.
I'm so grateful, and I'm like truly, it makes me emotional anytime I think about my partner because he really is the best of the best. He is the best person. I'm so lucky to have him love me and want to be with me and build a life with me because, he is a champion. He is a supporter. He is a ride or die. He is somebody who is so talented in his own right. And I couldn't imagine, I would not be here today doing this podcast, doing all the incredible career triumphs I'm having without him. Like, it's just, there's no way I would be here without him. But it's also been a lot. We've gone through a lot in our relationship because we're both, Latinos who are breaking generational curses and cycles. Like, we are both, had therapy journeys in our relationship. He was not going to therapy when we first started dating. And now he is seeing a new therapist that is more reflective of his experience. And I think that's like doing wonders for him. And we've tried couples therapy. We probably should try again, now that I'm in a better place, that he's in a better place. But yeah, it's like we are like, he is the oldest son of a single parent who is an immigrant to this country. That's tough,
That's big.
He was his mother's keeper, for many, many years. So he has a lot of trauma. I have a lot of trauma. I'm navigating familial strains and things of that nature. And so we have been each other's rock and support through breaking generational curses, but that does weigh on your relationship. It's like, it's such a different ball game when you don't come from stable homes.
Yes, big time. Big time. And yeah, we can literally stay on this topic for 3 hours because it's so much. But I want to talk to you about Welcome to El Barrio.
Yes.
So, abruptly changing subjects. So, Welcome to El Barrio is described as a love letter, an archive, and an invitation. And those are 3 very different things.
Mm-hmm.
And what does it mean for you to be able to put something out in the world that holds those 3 things?
It has been absolutely life-changing. I think growing up in the South, I had always felt, obviously we talked about this at the beginning of the episode, I had always felt very alone. And I think it's not even just like where I grew up, but also even in my own family. My brother and I are various different shades. Like, I am very Afro Boricua and he is a white passing Boricua.
No way.
Yeah. And I think that colored a lot of our upbringing. And he is also the golden boy. He's the eldest. And I think I grew up with a lot of loneliness in my own family because I always felt very othered. And making this show and being able to like learn about my culture in this beautiful way, meeting people doing such amazing work to preserve it, but also the letters I've been getting, the DMs I've been getting from people who have just been like, I needed this. It's just like made me feel like, yes, this is the right thing. Because I think when you're making something and it's like your baby, you're like, oh my God, I'm so precious about it. But what if everyone hates it? Like, what if actually nobody needed this? What if I'm just making something and it's just gonna go out in the ether and no one's gonna listen to it? But the fact that
I know that feeling.
I have people listening and that they want to listen and that they find value in it is everything. Like, that is all I ever wanted out of the show. I think when it comes to my art and my activism and my work, I've always come from a place of community building. I think because I lacked so much community growing up, I'm like never going to be in it for the money or the fame or like being the face, which is also why on the show art, I didn't want to be the face because I was like, this is welcome to a barrio. Like, this is a neighborhood. This is a community. I want this to feel like we're building something here. Even though, yes, it is rooted in my identity story and I am the one who's holding the mic to tell the stories, I want it to be a constant reminder that it's not just about me. It's about all of us who've had this experience, whether you are even Boricua or not. I think that is the beauty of the show, is that it's so authentic to the mission that anybody who has experienced loneliness, has experienced racism, who's experienced, lack of community, who has dealt with being somebody who is in between worlds. Like, I think you can find a home here.
I love that. What's the episode you want to but haven't been able to create just yet?
Ooh, that's a great question. Well, I mean, I feel like when I made the show, everyone's like, so when is Bad Bunny going to be on? And I'm like, well, that's the goal. That's like
Yes.
peak. That's the dream. But, I want to work up to it. Like, I don't want Bad Bunny for season 1, to be honest. Because then it's like, where do you go?
Right.
Kind of like my work journey. It's like, what? You start at the top and then it's like, no one's going to listen again after that. So, yeah, in theory, the episode I would love to make is interviewing Bad Bunny. But,
There's just so much to ask him, though.
there is so much to ask him. And, maybe my Spanish needs to be a lot better before I get there. Because
Sí, porque él prefiere
it's not
español.
there. Yeah, I don't speak very much Spanish. I understand a lot more now. I've been very grateful that my partner's family is
They force you.
not full of yeah, they don't speak any English, so I've had to like through immersion and assimilation like learn a lot, but I still am not super confident in like my response. I think I can hold like I would consider emergency Spanish. Like I can if I'm in an emergency, I can probably speak enough to like
It will come
help
out.
me.
Yeah.
But I don't think I'm conversational yet.
And how is that for Becca, whose mom is a Spanish teacher?
This is the question I've gotten my whole life. This is the question that's weighed on me and also weighed in our relationship. I think, obviously, if you listen to the episode 1, this is something we talk about. But I think this discussion in terms of Spanish in my home is probably the beginning of my journey of this podcast and of this identity journey I've been on. I think this has always been the origin pain point is that I don't speak Spanish because I couldn't even fit in with the Latino community because I didn't speak Spanish, let alone the Puerto Rican community. And I visited Puerto Rico for the first time when I was 15 and I felt, at home, but also not at home because like I couldn't speak Spanish and I wasn't immersed in these spaces. I had never been before. And so all that to say with my mother, I think I hold space and a lot of empathy for my parents at that time, making a decision what they felt was the best for my brother and I.
Mm-hmm.
But similarly to earlier, it still sucks and it's still painful and it's very weird because my mom is an amazing speaker. She majored in Spanish. She teaches Spanish. She was born and raised in Puerto Rico. She is a native speaker. And so I always felt weird that I didn't speak Spanish. And my mom has apologized ad nauseum for it. And I think for a long time, she used to blame my dad because I don't think she wanted to take accountability for her role in this, but I'm like, you have agency. You're a parent too. He wasn't the only parent. Yeah. And because my dad, he doesn't like to speak Spanish. He's very against Spanish. I mean, he's one of those Boricuas that is very like assimilated. He was taught that he needed to be American first. And that was very reflective on how he raised us and our identity and the duality of our home, where I had this very proud Puerto Rican mother and this very not proud Puerto Rican father, and they would weaponize Spanish in the home. Like they would speak to each other in Spanish, but only to talk shit about my brother and I, and I think their head was like, well, they don't know what we're saying. So like, it's not wrong to do that. And it's like, well, now I have this like very adverse reaction to Spanish that I'm still unlearning, that it's like not meant like, I'm like, how do I put this? I think before dating my partner, I always tuned out Spanish. I didn't even realize I would tune it out because I had been taught from such a young age that like, if someone's speaking Spanish, it's not for me because it's being weaponized against me. So I'm just not even going to listen. I'm not going to bother to learn because it hurts.
Mm-hmm.
And then dating my partner and his family's actively trying to speak to me, I've had to like put my active listening ears on because I'm just naturally tuning it out because I assume they're not talking to me because that's what I was taught growing up. And then they've been upset because they're like, we're trying. And that's fair. They have every right to be upset because they are trying. And I'm the one who's like having to unlearn this like bad habit I have of tuning out Spanish because it was such a negative connotation in my home. And my mom and I have had long conversations about that, and she's apologized. And I don't think my dad's ever seen it the same way. I think he's changed the perception about it many times in his head. He was never against learning Spanish, but I'm like, I think you
Low
have
key
to
you were.
acknowledge-
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, I think you have to acknowledge that you were not pro Spanish, like, and your negative perception affected how I viewed the language. You know, I saw you refuse to speak in Spanish to your family, to your mother, to my mother, respond in English and one word answers. And I went to a store with him when I was young. Like, we went to Walmart, and like the cashier tried to speak to him in Spanish. And I remember so vividly him going, "I'm an American, you speak to me in English." You know?
Wow.
So it's like, these are deep wounds he has, and that he like won't acknowledge that he has them. And it's just like, it wasn't like that. It would have been amazing had you spoke Spanish. And it's like, well, if that were the case, wouldn't I speak Spanish then? But
And I would say you're just as Puerto Rican speaking Spanish or not.
thank you. That's what I've learned with this podcast. And that has been very warming to hear. And it's also been very nice to hear listeners be like, your Spanish is not that bad. And I really appreciate that. Every one of you who have messaged me, I have taken that to heart, because it is so like, it is like my deepest insecurity about my Spanish. Like, it is like, I've spent decade learning Spanish. You know, I took it in school. I paid for outside programs as an adult. You know, I still pay for an app right now. Like, I am constantly actively trying to work on it, but it is so hard for me. It's like such a mental gymnastics. But I also learned I was late diagnosed with dyslexia as well. That dyslexia
Oh, so that flips
actually-
it.
Yeah, actually makes it very hard for you to learn a second language. And I had no idea. I always just thought I was like, something was wrong with me. Like, I just can't see. I'm an idiot. Like, I truly thought, I was like, I must be so dumb that I cannot learn this language. And I am actively trying to learn. So it was actually a huge relief to learn that I was dyslexic and that it's not all my fault in this like, or I guess it's like my fault in the sense that like I have a disability, but it's a disability. Like, it actually crazy when your disability actually disables you.
I know. I mean, your brain is just like, we're going to flip
Yeah.
those words. It's just,
Spelling is hard. You know, I can't read as well. And that is like so many things that are reflective in my like upbringing that I'm like, oh, you know, had anyone clocked this,
right.
maybe school wouldn't have been as hard.
Yes. But now we know.
Now we know.
Here we are. Tell us all the places and spaces where you can find you and the podcast and everything. Drop all the
Yeah,
links.
you can find Welcome to a Barrio at Welcome to a Barrio on Instagram. We also have a Substack that I am working on finding more time in my life to add stuff there, but it's in theory a space for bonus content. So I will be periodically uploading extra stuff like essays, you know, more deep dive written things, and also love to hear from listeners of what they're looking for on the Substack that I can curate more content for that. So a space for bonus content. You can check the link for that in the Welcome to a Barrio Instagram's bio. And then you can find Welcome to a Barrio wherever you stream your podcasts. And you can find and follow me at Becks, Beccs Ramos.
Yay. And we'll have all the links in the show notes so people
Yes.
don't have to worry about frantically having to write it. Well, Becca, thank you so much for coming to Café con Pam. This was fun.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. This was so lovely.
We got to talk about a lot of things.
A lot of stuff. And sorry if I derailed us a little bit.
No, I mean, when two ADHDers get together, I mean, this happens.
Yeah.
That's how it works. That's how it works. Bueno, that was my entrevista con Becca Ramos. And TBH, I didn't know this conversation was going to go where it went. I knew Becca's story arc. She's been vocal about it. She's shared it. You know, this is the interesting thing about people that are already public. You can find out a lot about them. And I told her, your arc is quite interesting when we started talking. But what I didn't know was how much of that story had not been told out loud before. And the moment in this conversation when she described when she got fired, the journaling affirmations from the hotel room at Disney while her family was outside and she was crying by herself, writing to herself, "You're worthy, you're good, you're okay," that connected with me because that's the thing we don't quite talk about. And that is the image that typically gets cropped when someone tells that they got fired and that their firing was a blessing in disguise. But I think the hotel room, the journal, the affirmations, the weight you carry alone for being the first in your family to be where you are and literally not having anyone ahead of you in the path to call. That's what I think was the most moving and what moved me the most from my conversation with Becca. And también talking about the Spanish, because I think it's important to mention it that, and we talked about it in the show, that she has a Puerto Rican mother who's a native Spanish speaker and a Spanish teacher. And Becca grew up not speaking Spanish. She shared that story, which in turn has been a journey for her. And during that moment, what she revealed in the conversation was her relationship to Spanish and how that was shaped by something she had truly no control over. Because Spanish was weaponized, a language was weaponized in her home. And so, because of it, her brain learned to tune it out. And like many of us, her late diagnosis made her realize that learning a second language is genuinely neurologically hard. I think all of those threads that we discussed, there are moments where all of us feel it. You know, there's so many pieces of her story where you can see yourself reflected. And in a way, for a long time, we may have built a story about what we can't do, what we don't have, who we're not. And at the end of the day, it turns out that it was a story based on a wound we didn't even know we were carrying. So I really love the going back to the arc of her story, what she's building with her podcast, and how she's still in the middle of her own identity reckoning. She didn't wait until she had it figured out. She built the archive before she had the answers. And there's something powerful there because you don't have to be healed to do the healing work. You don't have to be done or put together to get started. You just have to be honest. And that was very inspiring for me to see someone who's still like, I'm in the journey and, you know, I got my patines, mi patineta. I got on the wheels and I started pedaling and here we are. So, if this episode resonated with you, if you heard something in Becca's story that you recognized in yourself, I would love to hear it. I also encourage you to send this to whoever you think may resonate, to that person in your life who's still figuring out what it means to belong to a culture from a distance. Tag us both on the socials or whatever you want to tag us. Go subscribe to Welcome to El Barrio, whatever you stream your podcast. Check out her Substack. All the links are in the show notes. And if you're someone who has ever tuned out your own mother tongue because it hurt, I see you. Este episodio es para ti. Y bueno, como siempre, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening, for choosing to grow with me, for sitting inside the uncomfortable parts of this story today instead of skipping past them. Don't take your time for granted, ever. Nos vemos la próxima semana. Thank you so much. Y como siempre, sigue brillando.
Sabrosura pa' ti que